Hi. Well, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to spend some time with you today. I'm Jason Burke. I work with a company called Creo. We're a management consulting firm, and one of the things that we do is help organizations figure out how to become more data driven. How do they get more value out of their data and create more sophisticated forms of insights? So I thought I would just share with you today what are some of the common themes that come up as we're working with organizations and helping them grow to become more data driven. So one of the questions I like to ask organizations is how effectively can their employees navigate uh, their data and their analytical needs today? If you think about people being in really complex environments, like say large cities, maybe we'll take London for example, where there's many, many, many locations and things are kind of spread out. How do you effectively transit from one place to another? How do you get from where you are to where you would like to be? So in London, for example, you can take the tube system, which is this network of subways and rail cars that can pick you up at one station and get you to the next one. And of course, in order to use that effectively, you do need to know where the different stations are. You need a bit of a map or you need some understanding of what's where so that you know how to effectively navigate that. So the same is true for how employees navigate with data and analytics. Do they know where to go? Do they know what the stops are? Is there an efficient, easy way of getting from one place to another, like with a tube system? Or are they spending a lot of time walking from one place to another? Is it hard for them to figure out how to get what they need? So as you think about what some of those challenges might be in your organization, I'll share with you six typical areas that we see barriers within organizations. The first is availability. Employees just really can't find the insights. There's either too many insights and they don't know which ones they should be focusing on, or often there's too little. They just don't. There's nothing to look at in order for them to become more data driven. So that's often a challenge. Another challenge is that the insights that they do have access to don't really connect to what their personal priorities are, the reasons that they're at work, what are the things that matter to them in terms of the performance of their job. We often see challenges also in trust that they may see insights, but they may not necessarily trust the data, or they may not trust where the insight is coming from, the function or the individuals that are involved in terms of the expertise that they might have around that insight. So trust is a very common factor that organizations struggle with. They often also struggle with understanding, just not really being able to interpret what the insight is that they're seeing. They may see a number, but they really may not know, well, what does that number mean? What's in that? And if they do know what it means, they may not necessarily know how to change their behavior based on the numbers. So, okay, great, I have this insight. What am I supposed to actually do different now that I see that particular piece of information? But more often than not, one of the biggest barriers is just how easy is it to become data driven, to be data literate, to leverage those analytical and data assets. In many cases, it's just really, really challenging to be able to do that. So, in order to make those insights really matter and to ease that leverage, to overcome those barriers, I'm going to talk about seven main things that organizations can do to help grow more data-driven cultures and help their people be more effective in the way that they're using data and analytics. So the first one is problem framing, and problem framing is a very fancy way of basically saying how good's the question that you're actually asking of your data and analytics. It's fairly common to see organizations asking lots and lots and lots of analytical questions, but many of those questions would be what we consider to be low power questions, meaning asking questions about things that have happened in the past, but not necessarily about what's happening right now or what's going to be happening tomorrow. In many cases, they try to articulate those asks in terms of creating more and more dashboards. And there's sometimes a focus on if they're looking at advanced analytics, whether or not results are statistically significant or not, which is not necessarily a bad thing to ask, but what's more important is it business significant? So those are low power questions. High power questions tend to be things that are more prospective, that help us understand what's likely to happen in the future. What decisions could we make to influence the things that are going to be happening in the future? And insights that are really close to the asking of the question why. Why does something matter? Why do we care about it? What are we going to do differently based off of what we're going to see around that? So problem framing and asking the right questions, improving the power of the questions that the business is asking is one of the things that we like to focus on. Another thing that we like to focus on is contextualization. So it's really difficult for employees to know how to interpret and leverage information if they don't know anything about the data itself that was behind the insight. Um, Today, most employees don't struggle with a lack of data. They struggle with a lack of insights from the data. And in order to get the insights, they actually usually need to know information about the data, what we sometimes call metadata. They need more information than the insight itself in order to be able to effectively interpret the insight that they're seeing or to make the right decision based off of that. So, we're seeing the emergence of disciplines like data governance really kind of coming to the forefront now to really begin to put more information around our data to help us contextualize and give meaning to the data that we have so that we can make better use of it. One way that we can help with contextualization is making sure that as we're creating insights, we're not just focusing on descriptive statistics as part of an analysis. We're actually using descriptive statistics to provide some context as well. As you can see on this slide here, the first column, the left-hand column, is what people would typically see as the results of some analysis that an employee might be asked to create or to interpret. But the information on the right is pretty important in terms of being able to understand how to interpret the things that are on the left. And so we want to make sure that we're doing both. We're contextualizing the data and the insights that are being surfaced so that employees can be more informed about how to take action against information. Third big trend that we see around leveraging data is the adoption of data visualization. You're probably familiar with data visualization. It's really just the technologies that we use to make data graphical and interactive. The technologies that we have available to us today allow non-technical users to really get more engaged and involved in manipulating data, creating new insights from the data, exploring trends and uncovering new ways of thinking about the business. And so we think this is a really positive trend. It really creates a really different environment that and lowers some of the perceived barriers to people being able to get engaged around data. Data visualization is generally considered to be superior to the traditional approaches of the field of what we would have called business intelligence in the past, and there's still many uses for business intelligence, but data visualization is superior in a number of different ways. As I mentioned, it really goes a long way to getting employees more empowered. It also gives a lot more opportunities for interpretation, though, because I can manipulate the data multidimensionally. I can explore questions and what if scenarios that give me much better insight around how to interpret what I'm seeing. We make fewer assumptions around the way people are going to manipulate data with data visualization than we do in business intelligence applications, and that's helpful. And so these things kind of come together to help create cultures that are much more conducive to curiosity, to people being able to go in and really look at the business and derive new insights around it. So those are really good reasons to adopt data visualization. It's worth noting, though, that the adoption of data visualization is a major shift. It may sound like a simple thing. Hey, let's just make data visualization software available to everybody, but there's actually a whole lot of additional work that has to happen. in order for that to be effective, both from a business and business management as well as an IT management perspective. So it is more involved than just finding the right product, but it's definitely a positive trend that we see. Okay, the fourth of the seven things that I was going to share with you around overcoming those barriers is beginning to think about analytics as an iterative process that has a life cycle associated with it. So if you're in the field of data sciences or analytics for very long, you'll notice this common life cycle that emerges that starts with people asking, hopefully, high power questions. um, Characterizing their data, doing some analysis, doing some interpretation, communication, getting it deployed, figuring out how to maintenance. That process repeats over and over and over again. Even around the same question, it will repeat. It's a very iterative cycle. Now, one of the things that we see a lot is that organizations tend to spend a lot of time trying to focus on items 2 and 3 of this life cycle, the data characterization and the analysis. Around 60% of the time and 40% of the cost is usually around just the data piece. And then a lot of attention is spent looking at things like method selection and analytical modeling. There's nothing wrong with doing those things, but there's a ton of value in putting more emphasis on opportunity framing and deployment. So asking more powerful questions is better than quickly asking lots of little questions that don't have an impact. um, the best way to explore the impact is to ask the question, how is it going to be deployed? What is the decision that someone is going to make or the action that someone's going to take that's going to be different than what they're doing today based off of what they see? By focusing on those two things, organizations can immediately begin to shift to see more value out of their analytical investments. The fifth of the opportunities for overcoming barriers that I mentioned is transparency and this idea that analytical insights really flow through an organization at the speed of trust. So if you want an organization to become more data driven, one of the things you have to do is figure out how do you increase the trustworthiness of the data and the insights that are being generated. Certainly the data governance work I mentioned earlier, that's a component of trust building because it improves the quality and accuracy and organizational buy-in around data. But really, trust more broadly comes from transparency around three different things: the methods that are being used, what was the performance that was actually observed, and what is the nature of the insights that were produced as a result of that. And so thinking about doing things to develop more transparency in each of these three areas goes a long way to cultivating the kind of trust that leads to insights being adopted and being much more actionable. Now, having said that, that is not to say that transparency and trustworthiness eliminates objection handling. That it is common that socializing new insights will often involve people who articulate skepticism, who say, "I'm not sure that I agree with or believe that thing." And so trust is really not the same thing as acceptance. And what we want to be able to do from that life cycle perspective is we want to be able to listen to skepticism that may emerge and then understand what we want to do with that skepticism. So there's several different paths that we can take with it. One is that the skepticism can actually be fuel for the next time through the iterative life cycle. So like I said, it's typical that we go through that multiple times. Um, Objections and questions that surface as a result of one analysis should fuel the next round of analysis so that we can rule in or rule out the effect that's being created. This also gives us a real reason to iterate through that analytical life cycle. It provides some directions, and it gives us the opportunity to find out if there are any shortcomings in our insights. The sixth of the seven opportunities focuses on storytelling. So you may have run across this already if you've been involved in the field of analytics here recently. We're seeing a dramatic rise in the art and craft of telling stories around data. And one way that I like to describe that is the difference between a news broadcaster from the 1970s like Walter Cronkite versus a novelist like Stephen King. So they both know how to answer the typical literary questions of who, what, when, where. They're excellent communicators and writers, but Stephen King spends a lot more time describing the why and the how because he's looking for that richer kind of engagement. And certainly we're looking for that same type of richer engagement around data and analytics as well. If we're trying to create a data-driven culture, if we're trying to create insights that are really highly actionable, one of the ways to do that is to really focus on storytelling as a discipline. Excellent stories that emerge from analytics really have context and they use literary devices. Pictures are often really helpful and they focus on very simple language that's easy to understand. Uh, Analytical insights that struggle with storytelling often suffer from what we call mandates or kind of forcing conclusions without any particular engagement or buy-in or socialization around the insights. The information may be too complex. Sometimes they're trying to sugarcoat information that people already know is not that pleasant. So just remember, scary stories can still be good stories. And of course, statistical jargon, the overuse of statistical jargon, which is quite alienating for any recipients that don't happen to have training in statistics or advanced computational sciences. So the seventh and last of my opportunities for overcoming the barriers to creating a data-driven environment or culture, we return to this idea of governance. Now, we mentioned governance earlier in terms of data governance. Here, I'm talking about that governance, but I'm also talking about other kinds of governance. For example, if we're exploring new areas of the business with analytical insights and driving new information from that process, some of which may be positive and some of which may be negative. It's helpful for employees to know that that's a safe thing to do, that executives are endorsing people doing that, and that they're open to what the answers might be. So investment governance, the governance around, yes, we're going to look at this and we're going to be okay with the answers that come out of it, is a very effective tool to use to help drive adoption and increase engagement. And then, of course, organizational governance itself around what changes we're going to make based off of the insights that we receive is also useful. So, employees that are going to be investing in this, they're putting their time and energy into deriving a new insight. Are we going to do anything with it? Is this really going to be worthwhile or is this just a waste of time? So being able to not just talk about data governance, but more broadly investment and organizational governance that's associated with these investments are really effective tools in helping employees feel like this is something that they should be involved in, they should be excited and engaged around, and that it's going to produce a winning impact for them and the company. So in summary, we have covered seven different areas that help create insights that matter to employees. They flow from formulating more impactful questions that are much more tied to actions and behaviors that employees are going to be engaged in. We've talked about the role of storytelling and including more business context to help create more resonance and meaning for the people who are going to be seeing and interpreting the information. We've talked about acknowledging that there's a life cycle associated with analytical insights, and we want employees engaged across that life cycle. And we've talked about the role of governance to provide employees confidence in what they're doing. So I hope this has been helpful. I'll provide some contact information if anybody wants to follow up with me afterwards. Thanks so much.